Hi, and welcome to a new episode of In Conversation with me, Hugo Langton. And tonight I'm going to just veer off the highway again and just do something a little bit different. Okay, so I've invited three people on. So in effect, we've got a panel tonight of three people from different backgrounds to talk about more about the medical stroke. I don't know whether you want to call it physical preparation or whatever it might be. But I'm really pleased to be joined by Andy Driscoll, Sawyer, and Simon Brundish. So what I'm going to do first, guys, is I'm just going to ask you just very briefly just to let the viewers know a little bit about yourself. So we'll start with you, Simon. Welcome.
Hey, it's good to be on. So like you said, I'm Simon Brundish. I am probably a sports scientist of 25 years. I had various guises of different names that they all call my roles. So from fitness coach to personal trainer to analyst to strength and conditioning coach is the current thing. I worked across a gamut of all sports, including Olympic sports, tennis, cricket, rugby, athletics and football in the Premier League, and currently with the FA in youth pathway. And so physical preparation of football, of youth football, is kind of the thing I do.
Well, thank you. Ems, tell us about
Hello.
you. Hi. So yeah, welcome.
Thank you. I've been involved in non-league football for probably 10 years now. I've also had experience working with rugby, which was really fun. And I also have a background in Irish dancing, so I've treated some Irish dancers, which is nice. I've been a sports therapist for 9.5 of those 10 years, and it's that's me in a nutshell.
Well, thank you. And last but definitely not least, Andy, welcome.
Evening. So I have been in basically the fitness industry since 1996, after sort of minimal football career. I didn't go into coaching. I went into fitness, did personal training qualifications, then got back into sort of football as a football fitness coach, and then just carried on with doing some rehab, getting knowledgeable about rehab, soft tissue therapy. Then did some golf conditioning, so golf fitness, because obviously I love golf. And then I started doing my coaching badges. So I did a sort of a big circle from playing football to personal training to football fitness coach to rehab, and then last football coaching. So I've been a football coach since 2014, but obviously I can do a warm-up, I can do a football fitness session, I can take them in the gym. So obviously the only thing I'm not is a physio. And if I was to go back and get a degree, I probably would do a physio degree. If I could do a sports science degree at the same time as a physio, but if I had the choice, I'd do a physio degree, and then I'd be qualified in everything.
I can't help but ask you, mate. You refer to yourself as a football fitness coach, which is unusual because most people would just call themselves a fitness coach.
So
why is that?
Because it's about football fitness and not general fitness. So I am a general fitness coach as well as a golf fitness coach, but I am also a football rehab coach and a football fitness coach. So football is the context. But I'm sort of as I say, I'm a non-contextual or general fitness coach as well. So
but within football, so when you call yourself a football fitness coach when you're working specifically in football.
Yeah. So that's my context. Yeah, because I'm a golf fitness coach, but I'm not golf coach qualified.
Okay. Listen, I want to start the conversation because we're going to cover two topics tonight, and the one thing that I really wanted to start with was I as you know, I like Twitter, and I put out a tweet the other day that said that football managers and head coaches are responsible for their players' injuries. Okay, and I did it because I wanted to see what the response was. All right, so I thought this could be an interesting place to start with, because we're probably going to have three different answers here. But my context, my thinking behind it, so you guys know, is that, well, if you're the manager, you're the one that's hired, you're the top dog, you're the one that's brought into the club for whatever reason, and everybody below you, whether you're the assistant manager, you're the coach, you're the therapist, you're the S&C guy, you're the football fitness guy, they all have to report into the top dog, right? So one of the things that I've noticed a lot over the years in football is that there's a lot of miscommunication. Ems, I'm going to say something here that you'll probably relate to, that you can say to a manager, this player shouldn't play this week because of X, Y, Z. And they go, no, he's okay. He's playing. And then obviously injury happens. Okay. So, and that's his responsibility. So I'm just curious now, where are we going to start with this? So who's got an initial reflection on this?
Well, as a physio, I can't say as a coach or manager, I don't know, but as a physio sports therapist, yes, the manager does have a responsibility. I wouldn't say he is responsible for injuries, but if a physio or sports therapist comes to him and says, this player is not to play, the injury is X, Y, and Z, like you just said, or this player is not fit to play because, and then the manager asks the player and takes out your hands, then it's the manager's responsibility if an injury occurs. So yes, a manager is responsible. I saw one response to your tweet the other day, and it said, oh, what are you supposed to do about 50-50 tackle and they break their leg? That's a ridiculous comment, because that's out of everyone's hands. And these things happen. It's football. It's a contact sport. So that's an absolutely ridiculous comment to say that. But if you have made a call as a therapist or as the first aid or whatever you are, and you have said, no, this player is not fit to play, and it's taken out your hands, then yes, it's the manager's response. Injuries will fall to the manager, I'm afraid. That's my opinion.
Okay. Andy, what do you reckon?
So
if when you said about the internal communication, and this goes with staff, it's sort of been shown that the best organisations, non-football, have the best communication between staff, and the best football teams, or the best internal communication with staff of the teams, will probably have a better chance of success, whether you call that with no injuries, whether you call that promotion or staying up. If like Ems was saying about, if the therapist or physio says no, they shouldn't play, then yes, the manager is responsible. So, and what happens is Ems says no, he shouldn't play or she shouldn't play. The manager says no, they're fine because I used to do this, or it's okay, or I need them because we need to win. And then they get injured, and then they look straight back at Ems and go, well, they're injured now. And so I always used to say, which on reflection, I always used to say the physio medical team don't break players. It's the fitness coaches and the football coaches. They break the players unless they take the training. But obviously medical people could have a say in the overhaul training. So then they should be accountable. But I would say if the head coach chooses the training, the head coach chooses not to have a day off, the head coach chooses to do a double session, the head coach chooses to do sprinting at the end of training, the head coach chooses to do 3 hours of crossing and shooting on a Friday when they've got an away game sitting on the coach on the Saturday. If the head coach chooses all that to do that, or allows somebody in the organisation to, well, I want them to do a spinning class, or I want them to do more training or more load, he's going to get the sack. So by definition, he will be responsible for everything he does or doesn't do, or allows to happen, or doesn't know that's happening. So that's where normally the sports scientist or the fitness coach will keep the job. I'm not saying in all times, but the head coach will get the sack. So he's responsible. So he should know everything that's going on. And as I say, if the internal communication, and he trusts the therapist, and the therapist says, got to take him out, got to take her out, then he should be saying, yes, okay, that's fine. But there's no trust because of the internal communication is not there to start with. So people saying, oh, well, they're saying this and I'm the manager and it's my decision. But you need the best internal communication with the staff to have a chance.
Well, and Si, what's your initial thinking?
I think initial is tricky because it's a very, very broad statement. So
Yeah,
if
very.
we're talking in the pros, ultimately you're right, and probably in the hierarchy, the CEO is probably the guy that is. I say guy because all of the CEOs apart from one are guys, or the MD. They are the ones responsible because there is a hierarchy there that leads up to them. So they're the ones that have, whether they've employed everybody involved in the chain themselves or not, that they are ultimately responsible for those things.
The process, yeah.
I'm not sure that was your point. Are we talking more at a lower level from like semi-pro grassroots?
Well, I wanted to just make it as general as possible for a reason, because I wanted to try and provoke people from both backgrounds, which essentially I did.
It makes sense. So I think from the general population, I think that that a manager is ultimately responsible for a football team. But if we're talking non-league, grassroots, or particularly in youth football, I think that there comes a duty of care that they have for their players, and that's very much their role. But when you're talking part-time volunteers, your level 1, level 2 coaches, youth mods, whatever, that they ultimately are responsible, but they're never. It's from a parent's perspective. I entrust the coach with my child to basically babysit them and give them some kind of footballing guidance, and with the responsibility of not abusing them physically or doing anything that's going to thrash them. So if they're applying some kind of physical training that is contraindicated, then I actually blame the FA because they're the ones that gave them the supposed skills.
Listen, we could have a completely different discussion about the coach education in this country, and I think that could go on for days. But in terms of let's talk about semi-pro non-league football for a minute, okay? Because these guys they are only part-time within their roles in football. That so they've got a day job. That day job could be that they work in an office. It could be that they work on a building site. It could be they're a PT, and then so they do something, whatever it might be, sitting doing nothing during the day, or it could be that they're doing like something really physical during the day, and then they come to training in the evening, right? So my question is it then not the manager's, as you called it, care of duty, right, to know what's gone on when they're not at the club? So if I've got a player who's been carrying bricks or mixing cement or whatever it is all day long, he's going to be knackered. And then I'm going to expect him to come into training and he's knackered. And now I'm, without thinking about it, I'm overloading that player because I might say, right, we're going to do a football fitness night tonight, a football conditioning night, which that means then, well, he's got to do the same as everybody else, right? But he's knackered. So then is that then not my responsibility to know what he's been doing, for example? So I don't think that
in this specific case, I completely agree that, but in my experience in this setting, working with academies, which is less, it's just there is just less of a responsibility and less professionalism from the manager. If you're working with academies, you've got kids in schools, and their day-to-day lives can be vastly different, one child to the next. And boys and girls, very, very different. And then in like you say, in semi-pro football, exactly the same. So then it's obviously the manager's responsibility because everything's the manager's responsibility. But my role as an S&C or as a fitness coach like Andy, I make sure from an academy perspective, rather than running with builders, would be that I have a line of communication with their school, with their PE teachers and their parents. So I'm aware of their extracurricular stuff that they're doing. If say I have 16-year-old girl academies, if I have those girls that we've got training Tuesday, training Thursday, and then match Saturday, if they're playing for their county on Sunday, and then on Monday, school asks them to represent their cross country, which is very typical for girl footballers. They are kind of unicorns, and so that they're generally good at all sports or get picked for all sports because they're already standing out by doing something in so specialized and such a relatively high athletic level by 16. So it's my role, my responsibility to be aware of that and modify the training load. And sadly, it should be the coaches, the head coaches, 100% should be. But in my experience, they've set their football training session and I have to modify the kids around that because they just don't.
Yeah, so they're lazy.
So I'm going to ask Ems a question now. So like, if you've got training, all right, are you ever asked in advance before the session's planned? Are you communicating, saying this guy here he shouldn't do everything or whatever it might be, or this guy's hurt himself, shouldn't play tonight? So who's got that noise?
I can't hear it. I think all I can hear is the telly.
Oh, okay. There we go. Sorry for the people watching. Yeah, I was just saying, how important is it to you then that, or in general, to people in your role within football as well, that you have that communication? And I'll go as far as to say, how important is it for you, for someone who's a head coach or a manager, to have references about what you do? They don't need to know what you do. That's what you're there to do. But to have references and an understanding of what you do and why and the importance of it. Do you think the manager needs to have an understanding?
Yeah, so it is really funny. I've got when did we last play football? The last full season we did, me and my gaffer, we clashed a lot, but it's because I don't think he was used to having someone who was on his side, who was just like, this is happening, this isn't happening, bottom line. Whereas the person who was there before me was a bit like, oh, okay, we were the manager. Whereas I was a bit like, no, I'm the sports therapist, this is my bag, this is not happening. So we butted heads a lot, and we had many an argument, but many, like, we get on swimmingly. I mean, we get on so well. And I think my gaffer used to think that I was quite overprotective, like everything I did was over the top and I was too careful, and it was too, I was looking after players too much, like I was being a bit over cautious, which sometimes I am, especially when it comes to head injuries. But this particular day, his son was on the receiving end of the injury, and his son had actually broken his leg, but it wasn't an apparent break, but I could just tell by his body language. I was like, something not right here. I said his pain response is not correct for this injury as presenting. And he brought him to hospital. His leg was broken, and he said to me, you know what? He said, I sat back today as a dad and thought that was the right call. And he said it was then he realized, he thought, well, you know what? Actually, this is why she does what she does. And yeah, it wasn't a moment I wanted to get to. I don't want anyone to break a bone for people to see my point of view. But I thought, you know what, now we've got our level of understanding. And since then, our communication's wide open. So after a game, I'll message him like when we've left and gone home, and I'll be like, right, this is what's happened. I'll message him the next morning. So the players will message me on how they're feeling the next day. So I'll feed that back to him. And then I'll say to him, you don't have like Paul, John and Ryan for this session, and he'll be like, fine. So he can then plan for the players he will have and the players who are out, and then he can plan sessions for those coming back and get them into the right like scenario situation. So it's not a case that we don't talk and we don't communicate, and that my gaffer just goes, right, you're fit, back you come. He does take time with players coming back, and we have a massive communication. So I have no complaints from my own gaffer.
But there's a lot of gaffers that won't listen and will overrule. Particularly an important game coming up.
I've had it before with head injuries, and it's literally like I've literally left my physio bag on the table and gone, this isn't going to work. See ya, because he wants to play a player who's had a head injury, and I've walked out. I've been like, I cannot be responsible for this, because managers won't turn around. If a player, God forbid, touch wood, drops dead or has a severe brain hemorrhage or has lifelong lasting injuries or life-threatening injuries, a gaffer is never going to turn around and go, well, I didn't actually listen to the physio. People are going to turn around and go, why wasn't this done? Why didn't she do this? Why? What? So I will kick and I will scream and I will get my point across, because I realise the severity behind the lasting effects of a certain injury or the lasting effects of a manager's decision. But there are managers out there, number one, who will not work with women, which is great. Number two, who are like, no, when I played and I ran it off and I did this and I did that. And I would just like to say on the record, if I ever meet Terry Butcher, I may beat him slightly, because everyone says when they have a head injury, but Terry Butcher played on, and I literally want to choke the man to death with my bare hands. So it's just, it's the word is educating. People need to be educated, and especially the older generation in football need to be educated. I heard it the other day. I was at an under-18s game. A player came down on the back of a player's Achilles, and I heard the coach going, "Run it off," and I was like, oh my good God, please don't do that. So it's education more than anything.
Yeah, I think that ties in nicely with Simon's point earlier when he said about the coach education in this country. I mean, and I know I can speak for Andy when I say this, is that I have an understanding of it, but because we've educated ourselves externally away from what we're taught on our coaching courses, as it were, because I was never taught anything, even in my A life. Not really ever thought about this side of football.
The problem, Hugo, though, is when it comes to the medical side and you're talking to football coaches that blanket statement haven't been educated, whereas somebody in the fitness or somebody in the medical, they've done a qualification or they've done a degree which they've had to it has to be peer reviewed potentially, or they have to think about it, they have to reflect. Whereas football coaches badges, sometimes they just get them because they're ex-pros. Ex-pros are potentially, well, like what Em said, well, I played and I did this, so it doesn't matter. So if you look at talking to fitness people and medical people, they've done the degree, so they can actually go, all right, well, I'm not sure, but they can reflect because that's their background of the education. And they're like, okay, that makes sense. Whereas football is like, oh, well, I won and we used to do this, and so it must be true. And so talking to football coaches that haven't been educated is a lot worse than talking to a fitness coach or a sports scientist or a physio or somebody that has done a degree that'd be like, okay, so we have a difference of opinion, but I understand it because of their education, their upbringing. That's the problem when it comes to football coaches.
So this is the interesting thing that I also wrote on my Twitter the other day, was when about 5 years ago, we were going to, the team I was with, we were going to an away game on a bus, and it was quite a long journey, and the traffic was really, really bad. And we arrived at the ground late. So everything then became hurried. And 17 minutes in, my number 9, who was 34 years old at the time, pulled his hamstring. Okay. So he obviously had to come off, and I was, from that, my heart sunk in the 17th minute, and we won the game 2-0, I think it was. And on the bus on the way back, I was the assistant manager. I'm sitting with the manager, and we were looking back on the game, reflecting on the game. And I said to him that the player's hamstring injury was my fault, right? And he wouldn't have it. And I explained to him, it is my fault. I said, because I'm in charge as your assistant as overseeing the players' welfare and fitness, because I'd asked for that responsibility, okay, and I was given it. So, and he said, well, why? And I said, well, because I didn't take into consideration his age, the fact he's got previous hamstring problems, that we're running late, and I just let him get off the bus and do everything hurried and start the game. So then I'm thinking to myself, well, from that moment, if I'm ever on a delayed bus again, then I'd probably do something different. It might be something just small, that I just get him walking around the bus, whatever it may be, just stop him sitting for long periods of time. Do you know what I mean? So, and I hold myself completely and utterly accountable for the fact that he pulled his hamstring.
The thing is, I don't know if the two boys agree with me, they might not. With a muscular injury, if there's an imbalance there, it's going to come out at some stage. And if
I give you some context,
it's not a case of how, it's a case of when.
Yeah. But the thing is, I'll give you some background on it. I mean, obviously we were being aware of his age. I was aware of his injury history, and also the fact I wanted him to play 40 games that season. Well, when I say we as the management team, we wanted him to play 40 games that season. And the only way that we could do it was to minimize. He trained a lot less than everybody else because we figured he needed more time to recover. You know, he had a normal pre-season and he was fine at the end of it. And then he would, if we didn't have a game on a Tuesday, he wouldn't train on a Monday. If we had a game on a Tuesday, he'd been on the Monday because so he understood what the information was for the next day. Otherwise, we wouldn't see him till later in the week. We just give him that, and it was working fine, you know. And but it's still to this day, it haunts me, you know. It was my responsibility, and I'm not. By the way, I'm not looking for you guys to go yes, no. I'm using it as an example for the context of the conversation. Even though I wasn't the head coach, it was my responsibility, the players' welfare and fitness, and I screwed up. But so my question to people watching this, and one of the reasons I want to do this is that I'm happy to look at the mirror and go, that's my fault. All right. I'm not going to hide from it. So my question is to the people watching this, what about you? What do you think, Si, about what I just said?
Yeah, no, I actually think the things you and Andy just said tied together really nicely, and about education. I think it's not really about specific education or any course you're doing. I think you are a perfect example of having a growth mindset and being curious, and that makes you a good coach, and it also makes you probably a little bit more self-aware and responsible for your actions and your understandable lack of preparation. And me as a sports scientist would suggest that you are probably ill prepared to make sports science decisions, and that's not your fault. But so you taking that full responsibility is like me taking responsibility of who's going to fly, who's crashing a plane.
I understand that, but I was angry that the fact that I hadn't thought that, well, what happens when we travel, that this might happen.
Sure, but my point is that I don't know if you have a depth of understanding that could have.
100%, I don't.
So I don't think you could have removed the thing that caused his hamstring. That's my point. And sometimes we just have to accept that this is the standard that we're working at. And these are the constraints afforded us, and you're just going to work within those. And sometimes it doesn't. It's not perfect, and that's okay. So you had a guy that was sat on a bus for 2 or 3 hours in triple flex position, and once you get to a certain age, when your filet mignon muscle starts to grow into like stewed beef, and the collagen goes out of it, that you have to go through a greater period of mobilizing and activating those muscles. And there's a very good chance that he probably hadn't sprinted regularly enough in training that season. So you couldn't have prevented that. But my point is, I like that you feel responsible, and it's possible that you were responsible, but that it's also not your fault. And I think those two things aren't the same.
Yeah, it's beyond my skill set and knowledge. I accept that. But then doesn't this then now make the whole point, right? Is that, let's just say now we were a professional football club, right? And we had all the staff that we wanted, okay? And I'm the manager, not the assistant manager. I'm the head coach. Same situation, held up on the bus, traffic. They're not going to put kickoff back, everything. We've got to be hurried. And the players still, yeah. But surely then it isn't, again, is it your fault in a sense that, well, is it my fault that our lines of communication as the manager aren't great?
It's a fault and responsibility thing. It's your responsibility, but it would have been my fault. If I had not prepared that player and then not told you that I hadn't prepared that player, it would be my fault. If I didn't feel the players were prepared enough, but then told you they weren't prepared enough, then it would be your fault. But either way, it's your responsibility.
Correct. But also, it's also my fault for not having that. Surely, then, for not having that line of communication with you, whereby we should be saying, right, okay, whatever we have to react to whatever situations there is, whether it is your bus is late or whatever it might be. The fact that we don't just sit on the bus and curse the traffic and look at our phones, that's as a head coach, as a manager, I believe that falls on that person, because the line of communication is clearly not good enough, and it's up to for me, my thinking. The manager is as I said, he's the top dog. Everything that happens below him, people are there for a reason, because they're good at what they do, whatever it might be. But if the communication doesn't go back up there, then that's my fault.
But that's what Simon was saying. If the line of communication and the process of the organisation, and then you trust the people, Simon would be saying, right, because of his external factors, because of age, because of all that, he probably needs a little bit longer. So stick him on the bench, and I can work with him, and then he can come on the sun. But if you haven't got that internal communication, then the blame game is quicker. Whereas if you have, well, what if that happens? Well, that's the thing. What I'm thinking, you can't stop injuries happening, but you can reduce the risk of it happening. Like what Em said, you can't stop impact injuries, but soft tissue injuries due to accumulation of fatigue, you can reduce the risk of that happening. But if it's a 34-year-old player, then then there's a higher risk, or a 16-year-old kid with a growth spurt, they could be higher compared to a 22-year-old that's sort of fit as a fiddle. But that's then you deal the better you can deal with anticipating the external factors, then you are reducing the risk of injuries happening, not stopping completely.
So I'm just going to veer off a little bit, okay? Because some of you, two of you so far have said impact, joints, bones. All right, we can't have any, basically shit happens, right? However, okay, so now we're in a very unique situation, all right, where we've been in a long lockdown, 4 months, whatever it is, right? And people are now returning to train and to play. And during that 4 months, they've played no football, okay? Yeah, they've gone out and they've done simple basic action training, whatever it might be, jogging, or, I don't know, doing keep-ups in the garden, doing dumbbell, whatever it might be. But isn't there now a huge underload within football players that they've played no football, which then means surely there's a huge underload of when bones come together in a tackle, which then surely then means that the risk of hurting a bone or fracturing, whatever it is, a bone or a joint, forget about muscles, right now, because teams are in their first week back out of lockdown, is higher than ever. So don't get me wrong, teams have to train and they're going to make training competitive, okay? But I see loads of people are overloading their players with their training. People are going games. So isn't that then also you're increasing the chance of somebody fracturing a bone?
Well, I've just had a quick pop-up. I'm thinking when you get older and you start playing, you play Sunday football and everybody's still got alcohol in the system from the Saturday night, and they're smoking and they're a little bit voluptuous, should we say, and they're old, they might have been good players 20 years ago. So their brain, the actual signal to from the brain to the limbs is a lot slower, and you get more bad tackles. So the actual quality of the tackling is worse because of the poor quality of the players, because we're older. I'm thinking that, but with Germany, the increase of the injuries and the quality of the football was rubbish because
this is the Bundesliga last summer.
So the quality of the football was actually poor, and the increase in injuries was massive because they didn't have enough recovery. But the starting point is their fitness level with the big gap. You're normal every single pre-season. You might have 4 weeks off season. Now you've got 14 weeks off season. That means you've got a lower starting point fitness level, and people may not have anticipated that, and they've gone in at that normal pre-season level. And people are just not used to it. Like you're saying, you're not doing anything. And
so are you saying it's the manager's responsibility?
But I like what Simon said. I don't think the manager would ever think about that. But if we actually we've experienced it where we've played on a Sunday and you're getting kicked because the quality of the defending and the tackling is a lot worse than men's senior football and the higher, you end up, you probably will end up, wasn't it Leeds? Leeds had loads of injuries, and sort of like the head of medical sort of said that because of the way they press, they were going into so many tackles. And so because of that, they had a lot more impact injuries. So that's where the argument is going to be, impact injuries. But I get that. It's like you're playing Sunday football. Football tackling.
My point is only that, particularly now when there's been a huge physical underload for footballers, to go back into a normal load, which now is an overload, surely that's my question is then, doesn't it heighten the chance of not just normal injury, but the word's anatomical, isn't it?
Yeah. But you got the deceleration as well on the joints and the like the tendons, because they've been under trained. It's madness, but people will get away with doing it.
Si, what do you say about my statement?
Sorry, Si.
No, go. I was waiting for you.
Andy said there, the older you get and the lower level of football you play, the worse the tackle. Let me bring you back to Jordan Henderson and Virgil van Dijk.
Yes,
Mistimed.
Still happens.
I think not. Maybe I'm a bit bitter because I'm a Liverpool supporter. But so going back to football coming back, my under 18s, say my under 18s if I'm the gaffer, but they're my boys. My under 18s came back last week, and the gaffer literally did light warm up, nothing out of the ordinary, and the boys were all standing around, and he said, had I anything to say? And I just said, you're not on trial, boys. You've all played for this team before. Just play football the way you enjoy it, because you know what's going to happen. You can see 16, 17-year-olds frothing at the mouth to get a ball at their feet, and they just want to come back testosterone driven and just cause hell. So literally I just said, look, you're not on trial, this is your team, just play football. And it was such a nice session, minimal injuries, and this is what we're up against with the seniors, because obviously the gaffer sent out the text about the return date, and I can see it in my head already. I can see everyone going out smashing road runs and all this, and then coming back and just being like, my knees hurt, my ankles hurt, my hips hurt, and I'm like, oh. So I think it's just a case of managing the return rather than just starting and training. You just manage it. That's my opinion.
And that's going to be specific as well. It's going to be a big difference in age. So the older you get, you're going to have completely different outcomes from lockdown. So I see 30-year-olds out jogging all the time, or they've been on a bike, so they might have a decent level of aerobic fitness, but they might have been lifting some weights, but largely at home, so they're not going to have big squat racks knocking around, so they'll be lifting low weights, so their bodies won't have experienced the loading from even what I get my kids to do is jump off stairs. They don't have that what Andy was saying, deceleration, so that they can't turn their muscle fibers on rapidly enough to slow themselves down, so that what happens is you will end up getting joint injuries because of that. But then one untalked about consequence of lockdown is that people haven't been outside for the better part of a year. So on top of the vitamin deficiencies they're going to have because of these things, which affect their musculoskeletal system, right? They also, as we get younger in age, down to teenagers and early 20s, if early 20s and they've been at work, they might have been furloughed, they're going to be sat at home playing PlayStation, right? So you've got kids or young adults that typically work for a living or at school, and forget the training aspect, just the daily activity aspect. You're going to be reducing these people from 15,000 steps down to 1 or 2 from being around the house, right? So consequently, that means that they've been on their feet 2 or 3 hours less every day. then bone mineral density will have dropped. So you legitimately could be getting fractures that we've not seen before from any kind of impact, because the heads of their bones will be less dense than they were previously, because their body hasn't had to fight against. So it will be similar to, I don't know if any of you have watched there are like 3 or 4 different space travel to the moon TV shows that have been on during lockdown. Right, you know, like Apollo 13 kind of stuff, right? And they talk about the stuff that what happens when you go in space for 6 weeks and you get bigger, but your muscles get weaker because they're not being used, and your bones get weaker because then they don't have to fight gravity.
Yeah,
we've caused this through lockdown. So you're going to have 20-somethings and teenagers, particularly teenagers because they might have grown, which makes it worse, but their bodies haven't been fighting gravity. So suddenly they're jumping and running, and their bones, we're going to get severs, we're going to get lots of bad injuries knocking around, little hairline fractures. So this is, I think it's a really good point that Hugo's made that nobody is talking about.
The way that I look at it, all right, is this, you know, I'm a 46-year-old bloke, right? And I go to the gym every Saturday morning early. And over time, when I started in the gym, I couldn't really squat anything like that. But just before the gym shut, which was in December, I managed to break to squat 100 kilograms. That was my goal. I want to squat 100, then I want to go to 120, right? And dead. So I beat my 100 kilogram squat. I was really pleased, right? So now I've not done it for 4 months, right? And I'm due to go back on a week on Saturday, whatever it is, okay, after April the 12th, right? So my question would be then, am I going to be able to walk straight back into that gym and squat 100 kilograms? Or am I going to have to maybe start at 60 and go back up again? Which I know that you guys will tell me the answer is I'm going to have to go down to go back up again. So that's fine, right? So then surely returning to training for footballers now, so that's like saying they're basically, by going straight back into games, that's like me going back into the gym to squat 100 kilograms, but having not done it for 4 months.
Yeah, that's my argument. I always flip it back and say, well, if you go into the gym, you haven't been to the gym for 6 weeks, 6 months, couple of weeks, are you going to do what you did last time? And pretty much most people, or if they're sort of a personal trainer or a fitness, they'd be like, no, of course you wouldn't do that. You'd have to do it properly. I was like, okay, well, think about that in football. Why are we doing it in football? Yeah, think about that. Different? Yeah, because they forget.
So people are going to get a lot more injuries because the manager has said, well, this is what we're going to do. So that brings me around in a nice big circle. Whose fault are the injuries?
Because there's principles in the gym or rehab, pain management, anatomy and physiology. There's principles that you would stick to or you would look at. In football, there seems to be no principles, especially if the coach has no knowledge of fitness or rehab or those principles, and then it goes out the window because it's all about winning. And then he gets the sack and blames bad luck.
Well, if you're asking the question on whose fault it is, and we've just come out of lockdown, I have to blame China.
I would leverage a little bit against the FA for allowing games in the first 2 weeks. There should be a minimum of 2 weeks before. I would say 3. What we prescribe is you're starting at 40% of training load, and then you're increasing 30% week on week. No one's sticking to that, but in the professional academies, that's been the prescription of training.
But now it will be interesting then to say, have a conversation, maybe Simon, in 2 or 3 months' time, if we had the result of that projection in terms of, well, how many injuries were there?
I sadly saw in grassroots, I saw 28 training sessions last week. All but 2 of them were similar levels to what I'd recommend. And then I've heard back from lots of different academies. And in the first week, because the under-16s were allowed back across the professional academies, and in 4 academies, we had 27 soft tissue injuries in the first 3 days.
I don't know if you can see me, but I don't look at all surprised or shocked.
But now
It
The only
depends.
surprise is
It
it's
depends
not
what the
more.
incentive is. That's the problem. It depends what the incentive is to the decision makers. If the league say you're going to play football, then that becomes the incentive, and that drives decision making rather than the welfare of the people.
Yeah,
Of the
but that's a step. But then you manage that differently. You have to find a way. Something that Andy and I have discussed a lot away of camera and stuff is that you'd have to alter if you could think properly or can understand your own thinking, is that rather than going right, we have to return to play right in 2 weeks' time. We might be able to train 4 times, but we have to play a league game, cup game, whatever it is. Okay. Now I want my team to be press, right? And then you're asking for trouble. So surely the sensible thing would be that you do it for periods of the game. So you alter your playing style within the game. All right. So then you can press, say, for 10, 15 minutes in the first half, and then you can go, right, okay. And in the beginning of the second half, when you're able to make subs or whatever, you can do it again. Do you see what I mean? So then that way as well, it's a solution to protecting your players further. I would have thought.
But also, what Simon was saying
So-
about the academies was that isn't the now the academies have to audit, so the audit for the medical bills. So all of a sudden, if you're spending a lot of money on broken kids in your academy, it's now showing up in the audit. So there potentially is a bit of accountability for that, for the broken players.
I think Ems had lost it when you said broken kids. She's gone. We understand what you mean, Andy. Yeah, there is that.
It's still so funny.
Yeah.
Was that? Yeah. I'm trying to think of a better word than broken kids.
No,
but,
it's blinding.
But yeah, well, all these coaches break the kids, but now at least if it is you have to audit, you're then saying how much money has the academy spent on medical bills. Then
the audit, Andy, in the academies is not a financial one. It's the EPPP, which is an injury audit, and they have to update their data of how much they're training against how many injuries they get. Just that use of audit. Some clubs will, but I wish they did, because then it would increase the value of the people they're paying to keep those players fit.
Yeah.
£12.50. They're actually it's a little bit more valuable than paying 25 grand to keep a 20, 40 million pound players fit and available. If they actually look at the value of keeping players available for training, that's my idea. Is my 100%. Role is to keep players available to train, because that's how they get better, and then the coach can use them however they will.
Yeah, 100%.
Brilliant. So that to finish up then with guys, maybe one piece of advice each from you. I don't know, but what advice would you give to the people watching in terms of what's going on, and now you're returning to training? What piece of advice would you give anyone watching this? Ems, do you want to go first?
Damn it. Listen to the physio, listen to coaches. I think some players get it in their head that the physio is against them and wants to see them on the bench. That's the last thing I want to see. I hate a busy physio room. I like to sit down and have my cup of tea. So my physio room's empty, I'm at my happiest. So my advice to players is just take it easy. Rome wasn't built in a day, and we've all had a tough whole year. So go easy on yourself.
Maybe rest a lot between sessions.
Rest a lot between sessions. My go-to, because I'm an old lady and I've played football before, but when I played, my go-to was a lovely Epsom salt bath. So, or bath, as you say over here. So maybe get yourself on the Epsom salt. Depends on if you're north or south. North say bath.
Yeah, I say bath. Si, what advice can you give?
I would say, from a coach's perspective, less is more. If you can, try to count the amount of sprinting you're making your players do, and reduce it to half in training, and then gradually add back in at 30% extra this week. If it doesn't, if then no one's injured, then 30% more the next week, then 30% more the week after that, and you should
gradual build up.
But sprinting is the enemy right now.
It's interesting you say that, because most, being a little bit off topic here, most when it comes to football fitness sessions and pre-season and return now, people don't think about sprints. It's all about running around the pitch for 20 minutes, going up and down hills and stuff, and then they wonder why the players can't sprint. But anyway, Andy.
So I'd suppose, even if you're in grassroots, if the physio's saying this information, we're not saying go and get a degree, but become more knowledgeable and understand why the physio's saying this. So then you have a better outcome, because if you're singing from the same hymn sheet, the goal is you've got a better chance of the goal. So, work out, if you're the head coach, work out what you want to do, and it might be winning. But how does that happen? Winning, scoring more goals, but you need, like Simon says, you need your best players. So how do we get the best players? And then you then look at what Simon said, the sprints. So the outcome is winning. How do you have the best players? Well, you've got to then work out what the training is to then get the best players. And so it's on one line. That comes back to the internal communication. Then you've got a better chance of that, whether it's winning or getting promoted.
Brilliant. Well, listen, guys, thank you so much for sparing me some of your time, and hopefully for the people that will get to watch this, and hopefully that people will give them things to think about, and about how we can look after our players better. So listen, guys, thank you very, very much.